Hi there, this is week 9 of writing short stories for City Lit, and I'm Scott Bradfield. We're going to talk today, you might be relieved to know we're not going to talk too much about point of view this week, but we will talk about something I think is probably the most important punctuation in fiction. And it's not the full stop or the comma or the quotation mark, it's the paragraph break, the paragraph indentation. When you shift paragraphs in a fiction, you do a number of things, and you can do a number of things. It's a very powerful piece of punctuation in fiction. I wanted to show you, we're going to look at a couple pages on page 38 from the Carver collection, and I want you to start looking at paragraphs as writers. I don't want you to just think of them as units of information. In most writing that we do, the paragraph is simply a unit of information. You might start your paragraph, I believe that China is an important international partner, and you would go on to give support for that argument. So you'd start your paragraph with an argument, and then you provide information or support for the argument. Fiction doesn't do that at all. Fiction is not information, and it's not a series of units of information. It's a series of sets of time sets, and narrative sets. And when you shift paragraphs, you shift to a number of things. And there's no end to the things you could do with a paragraph, but I'll show you some of the basics. Look at page 38, and look at after the scene break. Look at the first paragraph. Each morning, he followed her into the bathroom and waited while she stepped onto the scale. He got down on his knees with a pencil and the piece of paper. The paper was covered with dates, days of the week, numbers. He read the number on the scale, consulted the paper, and either nodded his head or pursed his lips. Now, that's a little story there, that paragraph. It's talking about a generalized sense of time. It's talking about how every morning Earl does something. And then, in the course of the paragraph, it takes us through the average day of Earl keeping an eye on his wife's weight. And the paragraph ends with an action. He read the number on the scale, consulted the paper, and either nodded his head or pursed his lips. And there's a little story in that paragraph. Now that paragraph covers a large amount of time. It could be several weeks. It tells it in one single story, and it organizes all these many weeks into one single story, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, almost like a little scene. Now watch what happens when we shift the paragraphs, and we go to the next paragraph. Doreen spent more time in bed now. Now look at a number of things that have happened. Carver has left Earl's routines behind and that little relationship between Earl and his wife on judging her and keeping track of her. And now we've shifted the focus of the story to Doreen and another story, which is her decision to kind of spend more time in bed, as we can sort of understand having looked at this kind of unpleasant relationship. Listen to this little paragraph. It's very different from the previous one. Doreen spent some more time in bed now. She went back to bed after the children had left for school, and she napped in the afternoons before going to work. Earl helped around the house, watched television, and let her sleep. He did all the shopping, and once in a while, he went on an interview. Now, a different paragraph has come along. It's still talking about general time over a course of a few weeks, but it's coming after the previous story, the story of him constantly obsessing about what she's eating, and it moves on to this sort of distancing and this moving apart of Earl and his wife. While he's going off, he's tidying up, she's getting more and more depressed and morose, and it's another little unit of time. It takes place after the previous unit, and it covers general time over a period of weeks. Watch what happens in the next paragraph. One night, he put the children to bed, turned off the television, and decided to go for a few drinks. When the bar closed, he drove to the coffee shop. Now look at all the things that have happened in this next paragraph. We've shifted from general time, from large units of time, to one night he put the children to bed, turned off the television, and decided to go out for a few drinks. Now in that paragraph, we're shifting the sense of time. It shifted immediately at the beginning of the paragraph, and it's become specific time. It's become what I call real time often. It's happening as we watch things occur. And in that little paragraph, we have the setup for what follows in this scene. He goes out, he has a few drinks, and then he decides to go to the coffee shop. Now look how much time, there's a good unit of time there. It's an evening. It's a complete evening. But it takes us from one sense of time, this generalized time, where their relationship is at, to a specific evening, and it takes us over the course of an evening in 2 sentences. You can do a lot with a paragraph, but you have to sort of think about that paragraph as having a narrative coherence to it, and that it's not just a lot of things you decide to shove into the paragraph. So really start thinking that these are little narrative units. How clear can you make them? How complete can you make that paragraph? And how can it lead to the next paragraph? And that's what good writers do and what Carver does all the time. So watch now what happens. When the bar closed, he drove to the coffee shop. He sat at the counter and waited. When she saw him, she said, "Kid's okay." And now we're even more real time. He's taken us from general time down to maybe more specific one evening, and now we're sitting at the bar, and look at the paragraph does there. He sat at the counter and waited. When she saw him, she said, "Kid's okay." We're with him in the coffee shop. We see his wife come towards him, and that paragraph, it's only a line and a half, has as much in it, time-wise, as this long paragraph at the beginning of the scene. It has a whole unitary compactness. In other words, what I'm trying to get you to see is that paragraphs are not how much we can shove into the paragraph, how many words, how many images, how many ideas we shove into a paragraph. Paragraphs do something much more important, which is they measure the beat of the story as it occurs. And that's what you need to listen to. You need to not worry about how many words can I write in a paragraph, but does the paragraph have a sense of completeness? Does it follow on from the previous paragraph? You can move from generalized time down to more specific time, and perhaps back again to more generalized time, but they're leading in a certain direction. You can't just jumble from generalized time, one specific night, somebody's idea, something that happened 3 days before, something that happened 3 days later. It has to be coherent and progressive and simple in a way. You want to be able to see that movement forward. When you shift paragraphs, do it with a sense of deliberateness and understanding where you're heading, and not just because you're not thinking what the paragraph does. The paragraph measures time, it organizes time, and it organizes our perceptions of time. And try to look for that when you're reading the stories that you like. The story starts, now look at these paragraphs, very short paragraphs, compact paragraphs. They're measuring the shift back and forth between Earl and other people who are speaking. In other words, each paragraph is recognizing that we're shifting our focus from one person to another. He sat at the counter and waited. When she saw him, she said, "Kid's okay." Earl nodded. It's a perfect paragraph. He reacts to her. He took his time ordering. Now look, a passage is passed. He's nodded. He took his time ordering. He kept looking at her as she moved up and down behind the counter. He finally ordered a cheeseburger. She gave the order to the cook and went to wait on someone else. Time is slowed down again. We're watching a number of things happen over the course of 15-20 minutes. It's not she says something, he says something. It covers a long period of time. But it's moving forward, and it's not shifting around wildly. And the paragraph is fairly measured. So each sentence is not shifting in time. Each sentence is roughly covering, a longer unit of time each sentence. So try to think about that. You want to be measured, you want to be regular. You don't want to be just jumping around in time. You want to be moving forward. Another waitress came by with a coffee pot and filled Earl's cup. "Who's your friend?" he said, and nodded at his wife. "Her name's Doreen," the waitress said. "She looks a lot different than the last time I was in here," he said. "I wouldn't know," the waitress said. Each of those sentences is measured. It's the measure of people speaking to one another in a fairly clipped, simple way, back and forth. Each paragraph shifts our perception of who's speaking, so we move from Earl to the waitress, and it keeps us in dramatic, real time. I'm gonna stop there because I can't go too long with these, or it becomes trouble putting it on YouTube. But I want to say that what we're doing for our last couple weeks exercise will be a round robin exercise. So I've given you all a rota, and I'm going to ask you to take turns writing paragraphs in developing a short story. I want you to think about what a paragraph does. I want you to think very hard about, I want you to try not to think about how many words can I put in it, and start thinking that "he nodded" is a perfectly good paragraph, especially if it follows on from the previous paragraph and it leads us towards a paragraph that follows after "he nodded." So think about that when you write your paragraph. Look carefully at the comments. What I'll try to do every evening is reply to the day's paragraph and start to suggest what sort of things you need to think about. Once you've written the first paragraph of a short story, your horizons and your opportunities are starting to diminish. There's only so much you can do. Time has been established, point of view is starting to be established, the direction of the story has started to be established, and every paragraph is going to lead you forward. It's not just something you can just make up off the top of your head. You're going to have certain responsibilities each paragraph, one paragraph after another. And if that's all you learn from this, that should be enough. And just try to have some fun with it. And again, you can enjoy yourself and have a good time, but just try to recognize that you're moving forward, you're maintaining the point of view that was established earlier, and if you shift point of view, or you shift a sense of time, know you're doing it. Okay? Great. So we'll play with that for the next couple of weeks, and keep reading every day, and just drop me a line if you have any questions, and again, I'll be replying every evening to the day's paragraph. Okay. Good night.